And prior to joining the private sector, Mr. Kerbeam had a storied career in the U.S. Navy and as a NASA astronaut, where he flew on 3 space flights. On his final mission in 2006, Mr. Kerbeam completed 4 spacewalks, setting the record for most spacewalks in one mission. So with that, Mr. Kerbeam, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much to the WSBR for having us and for allowing us to sponsor this session. It is my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant General John E. Shaw, Deputy Commander of the U.S. Space Command. Space Command's strategic vision includes 4 space truths, one of which is space provides the warfighter a combat advantage from the ultimate high ground to the last tactical mile. From space to ground, Maxar offers a wide range of mature and innovative technologies that empower the U.S. military to take full advantage of the tactical space layer. These capabilities would advance even further with this year's launch of our first 6 Worldview Legion satellites. This expansion to Maxar's constellation will increase high-resolution capacity and help us to continue to reduce latency in supporting tactical timelines. In addition to satellite production and operation, Maxar's ground station, 3D georegistration, and AI/ML technologies enable rapid data processing and delivery of insights to end users when and where they need it the most. Maxar looks forward to playing our part in helping the U.S. Space Command advance this critical mission. Prior to his current position, Lieutenant General Shaw was dual-hatted as the commander, Combined Forces Space Component Command, U.S. Space Command, and Deputy Commander, Space Operations Command, U.S. Space Force. He also served as the Deputy Commander of Air Force Space Command, United States Air Force. Lieutenant General Shaw served in the 50th Space Wing, at the NRO, in the 32nd Air Operations Group, and at the Space Warfare Center. His operational commands have included the 4th Space Operations Squadron, the 50th Operations Group, and the 21st Space Wing. He also served at the U.S. Strategic Command as Director of the Commander's Actions Group and as Deputy Director for Operations, as well as in the Pentagon as Deputy Chief of Space Strategy and Integration. Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant General Shaw.
Hey, thanks, Robert, and good afternoon or good morning to all of you wherever you are, and greetings from the snow-covered Rocky Mountains out here in Colorado Springs. Ice-covered, actually, given what we've been experiencing here in weather in a lot of places in the world. Hey, also thanks to Maxar for hosting today, and thanks to Tori and Rob also for their introductory comments. Hey, so first of all, hey, I gotta apologize. You have the B team today. Most of you signed up for this expecting to have General Dickinson talking today. I'm sorry, you have me instead. Full disclosure, General Dickinson was taking some leave over the holiday weekend to Texas and is still there on an extended vacation due to the weather circumstances there with some rolling power outages to boot. And so, so again, thanks for indulging me as being your speaker here today on behalf of U.S. Space Command. I think this is actually an opportunity, though, because we can now get General Dickinson maybe to come to the Space Business Roundtable a little later this year, and then U.S. Space Command gets a chance to maybe talk to you a couple of times. So I hope that's the case. So here's what you get, though, if you have me talking instead of General Dickinson. Is there are some things that that I might talk about that he probably wouldn't want to. And here's an example. How about Tom Brady in the Super Bowl? You know, General Dickinson's kind of a Broncos fan. I'm not sure he would go there, but as a Massachusetts native and one that's had to deal with New England sports problems in the 20th century and how good they've been this century, I definitely watched the Super Bowl. And it was great to see Tom Brady get his 7th Super Bowl ring. By my count, he now has as many rings as the planet Saturn, and 2 more than the Pentagon, which only goes out to the E ring. So, and more to come probably. So interesting that there was a Boston sports headline after the Super Bowl that alluded to the fact that that there were a number of former Patriots on the Buccaneers team in the Super Bowl, 3 of which combined to score most of the points for the Buccaneers. And so the Boston sports headline was, Patriots win Super Bowl for Buccaneers. So what's my point? Well, I'm sure the Buccaneers don't mind. They're happy to have a Super Bowl win. And as we go forward as U.S. Space Command, we want to have everybody on our team. And if there's a future headline that says Washington Space Business Roundtable or space commercial space wins the fight for U.S. Space Command, we're all in. We need you on the team. Absolutely. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that lately. Thanks for indulging that introduction. And don't let General Dickinson know that I talked all about Tom Brady and not Peyton Manning. Hey, so probably worth talking a little bit about where we are today and also some clarification. You know, we continue to see in the mainstream press confusion between the United States Space Command and the United States Space Force, and understandably so to an extent. Both organizations stood up in 2019. Both are just over a year old and are growing, but there's a difference. And most of you probably know, probably all of you on this, but it's worth, especially since one of your mission sets as the roundtable is education, worth kind of taking through that real quick so that you can help us spread this message. So it kind of goes back to congressional legislation in the 1980s called Goldwater-Nichols. And that was in the wake of some observations during the Vietnam era and post-Vietnam era of where we had trouble integrating our services and their combat forces. And so we stood up this new structure back then in 1986 that we still use today of the combatant command structure. And there are 11 of them now within the Department of Defense. Many of you are familiar, and more household kinds of names for those combatant commands are Central Command, CENTCOM, or maybe Strategic Command, STRATCOM. But United States Space Command is the 11th such combatant command. The purpose of a combatant command is to actually conduct warfighting, and they're called joint commands because all services contribute capabilities and warfighters to those commands for the actual conduct of those operations. That is in contrast to the services, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps, and now the Space Force. And the purpose of those organizations is to organize, train, and equip, to actually bring people in and train them, and also to develop capability that is then presented to combatant commanders by all the services for actual warfighting operations. And so now, whereas we had didn't have any organizations, either combatant command or service, dedicated solely to space just a year and a half ago, we now have both a combatant command, United States Space Command, and a service, United States Space Force, both focused on the space domain. So there is a difference. The headquarters to U.S. Space Command is right now temporarily here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The headquarters for the Space Force is in the Pentagon, where all the headquarters for the other services have been for the longest time. So good to draw that distinction. Now it's probably also worth revisiting, why did we stand up both of these organizations? And the answer to that is pretty simple. It's because we are now threatened in the space domain in ways that we were not in years past. We could rely on years past for space to be a benign domain. We could operate our space capabilities relatively free from threat, and then we focused most of our energy on making sure that their capabilities, whether that was satellite communications or GPS or intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, focused on delivering those capabilities to the terrestrial domains and terrestrial users and warfighters. That's not the case anymore. We're under threat in the space domain, and so the purpose of these organizations now is to focus on that and be prepared to protect and defend our space capabilities within the space domain while continuing to deliver the services and effects that they provide to the terrestrial spheres. A little bit about those threats. So we look to China. We usually invoke the 2007 ASAT test that produced thousands of pieces of debris, ASAT, anti-satellite weapon, thousands of pieces of debris in low Earth orbit, most of which are still up there that we continue to track today and represent a navigational hazard to satellites operating in that orbital regime. But they've also continued to beat the drum and and produce more capability, kinetic kill vehicles, ground-based lasers, and more. And so clearly they continue to enhance their capabilities to deprive us of our use of our space capabilities in a potential crisis or conflict. And Russia has been doing the same, and particularly in some recent tests. They've conducted 2 on-orbit tests in the last 3 years, one in 2017 and one in 2020, of what I call as space torpedo, a satellite that actually ejects another satellite, then ejects a projectile or a space torpedo that could be used as a kinetic kill vehicle in space. And also they've been developing their ground-launched anti-satellite weapon capability, and just recently in December did yet another test of one of those into low Earth orbit that would be capable of disrupting or destroying our capabilities in low Earth orbit. And that's just a rough overview of what we're facing in the space domain. And so our focus, you know, from a United States Space Command perspective is really, it comes in 2 very large pieces. We need to continue to provide space capabilities to joint warfighters, to other combatant commands on the globe. But now we also need to protect and defend our capabilities in space. And it's really a 2-part overarching mission set that we have. And it's actually, it turns into an interesting, for those of you that love to read military doctrine, because you just can't put that down once you start reading that. The other 10 combatant commands that exist fall into one of 2 categories. They are either geographic combatant commands responsible for an area of responsibility on the globe and do conduct warfighting operations within that AOR, or they are functional combatant commands, such as Cyber Command or Special Operations Command or Transportation Command, that provide trans-regional effects and capabilities to the geographic combatant commands. Those are the other 10. For the 11th, U.S. Space Command, which one are we? We've actually, General Dickinson has actually been assigned an area of responsibility. And in fact, it is the space domain starting 100 kilometers above the surface of the Earth and extending out indefinitely. So it's actually the largest AOR of all of them, and it's getting bigger all the time, by the way. Space is getting bigger. The universe is expanding. And so responsible for that domain, protecting and defending in that domain. So in that sense, a geographic combatant command by doctrine. But we also operate as a functional combatant command on providing, again, trans-regional effects and capabilities to the other combatant commands on the globe. We do both. And so as we move forward and we grow this organization, which again is just a 1.5 years old now and getting into higher gears all the time, we're focused kind of on those 2 big pieces. And I thought that was a good backdrop to kind of deliver to you. The other piece here that we're also working with is how do we work with the U.S. Space Force? Now, the United States Space Command has service components. All of the other services actually have some unit or set of capabilities that they deliver to U.S. Space Command. The Army, for example, operates a large amount of our satellite communications infrastructure. As a service, it presents that to U.S. Space Command, that we then fight that capability and provide those effects for warfighters around the globe. I could say the same of all the services, but the United States Space Force, when it gets into high gear, it will be providing the vast majority of the capability that U.S. Space Command will have. And so we have a special, what I call a special binary star relationship with the United States Space Force that we'll have moving forward. How do we work, though? You have one service devoted to the space domain and one combat command to the space domain. How do they work together? And that's a big focus area for us moving forward as well. Moving forward, I would draw your attention, if you haven't seen it, to General Dickinson's strategic vision for United States Space Command. You can find it on our website. You heard some of the truths that Robert talked to that are in that strategic vision. But at the end of that document, there are 5 key tasks. And I just want to tick through those very quickly because they really have relevance to our conversation here today. And these are the 5 overarching tasks that General Dickinson has given the command. First is understand our competition. I've talked about that a little bit already. We're under threat. We need to understand that competition through all phases of potential conflict. and be prepared to respond. The second is to build the command to compete and win. Again, we're just a year and a half old. We're still bringing expertise into the command. We're still maturing our processes to operate as a full-fledged combatant command, but we continue to do so and at a very aggressive pace. The third key task is to maintain key relationships. And under this particular task, the focus is on working with allies. We have partners, allies and partners throughout our organization, and we expect that that integration to advance. Also working with other government organizations. NASA would be an example of one of those. I think one of your speakers in the last few months was Kathy Leaders from NASA, whom I know well, and since the very beginning of NASA's human exploration missions, the Department of Defense has been a teammate. Whether it was recovery of astronauts or tracking of space objects, particularly in more recent years, any potential space debris threats to the International Space Station, we've been teammates all along. I expect that relationship will continue. Fourth task is maintaining digital superiority, and almost can't talk to this enough. The cutting edge of cyberspace capabilities that exist today in our technological sphere are fully relevant to what we do in space, and vice versa. A lot of what we do in space is relevant to cyberspace in terms of information flow and networks, and I think that integration will only improve. And so when it comes to defending our capabilities from cyber threats and utilizing cyber capabilities to better do our missions, it's a key focus area for us. But the fifth task, and you can look this up if you go to the website, is integrating commercial and interagency organizations. Commercial. We need to integrate commercial. We need you as partners on this team. Many of the tasks that your organizations are working on, the research and development that you're independently doing, how you conduct your operations today, have full relevance to how we want to conduct operations and need to conduct operations in the future. And so we need to team together. And so that'll be an important focus area for the command moving forward as well. So I look forward to any questions that you'll have along those lines. So just a few more thoughts before we get to Q&A, because I really would like to hear what's on your minds and have a conversation. So how do we work better together? Well, in some ways, we're already doing it. We're already doing it. One of our functional components that's at the operational level within our organization is our Combined Force Space Component Command, headquartered out at Vandenberg Air Force Base out in California. As you heard Robert at the beginning talk about my most recent job, that's the job I came from a few months ago before coming here to U.S. Space Command, was the commander of that organization. We have a commercial integration cell that is there co-located with the Combined Space Operations Center there at Vandenberg. And a good number of the companies that are part of the Washington Space Business Roundtable are partners in that already today. Mostly from a satellite communications, but we've got some ISR involvement as well, and I think that will probably grow. And that's a really interesting construct because we have people that are out at Vandenberg representing those companies that are part of the operational picture. If we see something happen in space, we can share that. If one of those organizations or companies sees something happening in space, maybe in the satellite communication sphere interference, whether it's intentional or not, they let us know about it. And together we have a much better idea of what's going on in the space domain. But I'll also say we have another component here in Colorado Springs, functional component, an operational level organization called Joint Task Force Space Defense. And the National Space Defense Center is the ops center associated with that organization. And they too have commercial partners that they're working with continually as they try to explore how we can better protect and defend our space capabilities. So it's not just capability development, it's actually operational integration and partnering that's going on today. And I think that will only increase in the future. And together as a team, leveraging everything we can all bring to bear, we will better fulfill the national security needs within the space domain. So I guess I'll bring it back to Tom Brady, right? We want to be the greatest of all time, the GOAT, when it comes to protecting, defending our capabilities and delivering space effects to users around the world, whether they're warfighters or civilians that use space each and every day. And so you can help us be part of that team. Okay, I think I'll stop talking right there and like to hear what's on your minds, what questions you have. And again, thanks for having me today.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Shaw. So we do have our first question, and I'd like to remind everyone that if they have a question for Lieutenant General Shaw, please submit it in the chat box, and we'll call on you and give you the opportunity to ask it in person, so to speak. So our first question does come from Kimberly Underwood. So Kimberly, why don't you take yourself off mute and go ahead and ask your question.
And Kimberly, you're still on mute.
I think she's asking how many Super Bowl rings is Tom Brady going to win?
So what we can do is a technical issue like that. I'll just go ahead and I'll read the question to you. Oh no, are you good, Kimberly?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Sorry. Yeah, thanks, General, for your time today. I wanted to ask you what challenges you're facing in conducting joint operations in space warfighting, and kind of how the joint aspect of U.S. Space Command is evolving. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Kimberly. Hey, so great question. So there's two pieces to that. Well, there's probably a lot of pieces to that, but two that come to mind. First, thanks for reminding me to make clear that United States Space Command is a joint organization. We have all services represented here at the headquarters and at our functional components, the Joint Task Force of Space Defense and the Combined Force Space Component Command out at Vandenberg. And I think that we leverage that every day. The warfighting experience that all of that expertise brings to bear across all the domains and at different across the spectrum of conflict, we're leveraging that every day. It's nice to be able to sit at a table with someone from the Marine Corps and the United States Navy and the United States Army, the United States Air Force, and myself being in the Space Force now and leveraging that combined experience to understand how we can better do our mission sets both in the space domain and in delivering effects. And then there's the other aspect of, again, the need for us to integrate space capabilities into joint warfighting in the terrestrial spheres. So for example, Indo-Pacific Command, that's our combatant command that is responsible for an area of responsibility that encompasses most of the Pacific Ocean as well as a good part of the Indian Ocean and the land, many of the land masses that associated with those oceans. And so we are working with them closely as they go through exercises on possible scenarios they could face in that AOR. We work with them on how can we deliver space effects most successfully? How do we need to prioritize protection of our space capabilities to support their scheme of maneuver? And that, I think, is another aspect to your question of how we need to continue. That's our functional component command role, right? Of integrating those capabilities in a multi-regional context. By the way, even when we're focused on just that particular maybe fight that's going on in the Indo-PACOM AOR, it's still global to a great extent. And so we still have to work with the other combatant commands, even as we're supporting them directly. So that is our prime focus, and I hope I answered your question well there, Kimberly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly, for the question. The next one comes from Gary Henry. So Gary, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, good morning, General Shaw. It's a pleasure to be with you. You just mentioned the schema maneuver and kind of getting to this point of our schema maneuver or what will enable our schema maneuver in the space fight. I was really interested in understanding how the U.S. Space Force core competency of space mobility and logistics will inform an architecture. And it seems like that architecture ought to be driven by U.S. Space Command's requirements to fight and win in space. And I was interested in kind of knowing how those two organizations, yours and Space Force, will collaborate, leveraging commercial capability to make that happen. And anything we can do to help you in that cause. Okay,
thanks, Gary. Hey, good to see you again. So Hey, so one thing I need to backtrack, I didn't say that you're giving me an opportunity to answer Kimberly's question is, not only do we support the scheme and maneuver of, say, Indo-PACOM or European Command or another combat command, we will have our own scheme and maneuver within the space domain, and it's conceivable that we will need other combatant commands to support that scheme of maneuver. For example, if we know a certain adversary is getting ready to launch an anti-satellite weapon at one of our key satellites that we're using, or maneuvering around in the domain for whatever mission needs we have, we may need another combatant command to take care of that problem for us, whether kinetically or otherwise. And so in our roles as both a geographic combatant command and a functional combatant command, we can be either supporting other commands or be supported. So this is another aspect of dealing with that fundamental challenge I talked about growing the command out. With regard to mobility and logistics, Hagar, I think the simplest way to answer that is to apply an axiom that seems to go a long ways for us, and that is we need to look at the space domain in many ways how we look at the other domains. Things that happen in the other domains and are normalized in those domains we find do have application in the space domain. And so I think we'll find as we move forward, we are going to want to find ways to be more mobile in space, possibly pre-position logistics in space, be able to replenish space assets rapidly from wherever, from the Earth's surface or from elsewhere in orbit. And that all falls under a kind of a strategic capability of mobility and logistics that exists in the maritime domain, that exists in the land domain, and in the air domain. And to not address and kind of ask those questions and requirements would probably be shutting a door that we need to keep open. And so we will continue to develop requirements along those lines. And I cannot imagine operations in the space domain in the decades and centuries to come without mobility and logistics underpinning all of those the way they have in the other domains for centuries and millennia.
Thank you for that. Our next question comes from Courtney Stodd. So Courtney, why don't you go ahead and ask?
General, thank you very much. General Dickinson recently was quoted as underscoring the importance of a civil space agency for space traffic management. And given the fact that at least, the previous administration handed that to Commerce, I wonder if you could provide insight as to the critical importance in terms of your overall mission to have a civil lead agency for STM space awareness fully executed with the appropriate resources and support. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Courtney, and good to see you again. It's like old home here virtually to get to see a lot of people. Man, I can't wait till we can see each other in person at a conference at some point post-COVID. Hey, Courtney, a great question. I think let me start by saying one of the greatest challenges we're facing as we look at having to protect and defend in the space domain. We look at most basically this area of responsibility that General Dickinson has been given to operate within by the president. How do we understand what's going on in that domain? And like I said, it's huge. It's a tyranny of volume, and we're talking looking out. It is not just looking out in low Earth orbit or not looking out just to geosynchronous orbit. We're probably needing to really focus our requirements at looking at least within the entire cislunar sphere, just to understand what's going on there, anything from space debris to natural hazards to potential threats. And that is quite a challenge, space domain awareness. And so we got that piece. The next piece I'd suggest is, as I was answering Gary's question, we think about how we do things in the other domain. The Department of Defense is not responsible for air traffic management. We have a civil agency that does that. And I think it's better equipped to do that. And we have international agreements with regard to civil air traffic that are run by similar civil organizations in other countries that together comprise kind of a global civil air traffic management framework. Same for the maritime domain. You know, the Department of Defense is not responsible for maritime traffic. We have, again, international agreements and civil organizations that are focused on that. Why would we do differently in space? Why are we doing it today? Why is Department of Defense actually the ones? And we do a terrific job of it, by the way. The 18th Space Control Squadron out of Vandenberg Air Force Base those are the folks that are tracking everything that is going on in orbit, taking our data that funnels to them, identifying if there are potential collisions and letting people know, just like the example I gave earlier of NASA and the International Space Station. They do a tremendous job of it. But I think the philosophical question, and we're probably, again, the last administration looked at it, and we'll await guidance from this current administration, is moving those kinds of functions for routine traffic in space, the same way that we have in the maritime and air domains, and moving those to a civil organization. And then the Department of Defense focuses on many of the things that I've already talked about today: potential threats, hazards that may be intentional, and protecting, defending our capabilities. That, I think, is just a more natural alignment of these roles as we together as a nation and as a world go to another level of activity within the space domain, whether that's civil, commercial, or national security. So, Courtney, hope that answers your question. But again, this is a rule where that axiom of looking at how we do things in other domains really seems to make a lot of sense for us.
Thank you. So our next question is from Nikita Shestakov. I'll go ahead and ask that question. It's related to space security. From your point of view, what are the prospects for a U.S.-Russia cooperation in space under the Biden administration? And that the General Raymond has recently noted that he supports the idea to maintain the bilateral dialogue on space security. So maybe if you could provide some comments on that.
Yeah, so that will be a national leadership decision on how and to what extent we engage with the Russians. I can say from an operational perspective, it's always helpful to be able to have a line of communication. Again, I will run back to the same thing. It's how we do things in other domains. There is a hotline between our Air Operations Center in Central Command in the Middle East and Russian air operations to deconflict operations in Syria and in that region, and it works because it's an opportunity to communicate when there may be an opportunity for miscommunication. And so we see that in other domains. I think it would be helpful to us in our domain. We'll see what mechanisms and opportunities we have moving forward.
Thank you. Our next question is from Linda Billings. Linda?
I will unmute. I am a consultant to NASA's Planetary Defense Program, and I know that Jim Bridenstine signed a new memorandum of understanding with Space Force on continued cooperation, basically with U.S. Space Command, which has been in place for some time. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about expanding opportunities for collaboration with NASA on planetary defense.
Hey, Lynn, I'm glad you asked. I should have mentioned that when I mentioned NASA earlier. And the answer is absolutely yes. In fact, I think that there's a good chance that there will be a U.S. Space Command NASA MOA within the next few months as well. And it'll be more operationally focused, right? The Space Force and NASA one was more about capabilities and technology, as would be logical from a service, as I described. With U.S. Space Command being responsible for operations, I think we'll probably look to seek to do something similar with NASA along those lines. And absolutely, I think we'll want to partner on planetary defense. Everything I said about space domain awareness and natural hazards applies to that. The same technologies that we want and can leverage to understand what's going on in the cislunar sphere can be used to identify potential natural threats to the planet. And so I absolutely, this is an avenue that I think you'll see more work on. And we'll do it together with Space Force, by the way. So Space Force, there was language about planetary defense cooperation between Space Force and NASA in their MOA. We would have the same, and I think together as those three organizations, from an operational perspective as well as a capability development perspective, will team together on that particular mission set, which I think is an important one.
Our next question is from Jeff Trower. Jeff?
Yes, thank you very much, General Shaw, for being here today. I'm with Vox Space, now part of Virgin Orbit. So I just wanted to follow up. You know, obviously, a Space Command, U.S. Space Command, isn't really an acquisition organization directly, and yet you're talking with a lot of companies interested in exploring opportunities. And you mentioned the commercial integration cell, but beyond that, do you have any more specific recommendations on how to approach Space Command? I mean, surely we're not all supposed to be zooming your office to connect with you, or maybe we should, but a little bit more advice on how best to engage with the command to highlight some new capabilities that industry might have.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for the question. So, hey, I still, the commercial integration cell, still not a bad place to start, as with our commercial partnering at the National Space Defense Center. Still not a bad place to start. As we move forward as a combat command and better define what we think are our requirements for research and development, as well as capabilities, and working with Space Force in that regard, I think we're all part of that same solar system and having that discussion. You know, General Dickinson is on a regular battle rhythm and drumbeat of visiting commercial companies to see what capabilities they have to better inform the requirements that we can then generate, work with Space Force and the other services to then go after those capabilities. So I think my first line would be for you to, if you can, to maybe reach out to our J8, that's our capabilities directorate, and connect with them. They're always interested in talking to our commercial partners.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Our next question is from Kevin Breisky. Kevin, go ahead.
Hey, General, it's great to see you again. It's been a while since we served together at U.S. Strategic Command. Just want to note, I was just talking with Admiral Haney the other day, and keeping contact with General Hyten and a lot of other folks back there that I had in my tour with you and others. I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to applaud you and General Dickinson on the vision that you've created, and your comments with respect to the team sport nature of space. Of course, we've worked together on creating that team in the past with respect to space capabilities. And so it's an opportunity for partner nations to contribute both the integration of space operations, but also commercial and capabilities with respect to services and products that would help in your area of space domain awareness. So it's a question. I would also add earlier question or response that you provided with respect to commercial companies helping. I'm with North Star Earth and Space right now. We're providing space domain awareness services and products. We are participating greatly with you in your SAC-T initiative at the NSDC and DOC. So that's another excellent opportunity. So again, just to say thanks very much. Keep up the good work, and looking forward to reconnecting whenever that happens.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Good to see you again. And you know, I could spend a lot of time here in the little bit of time that we have left, which we don't, talking about how we are integrating with our allies. Then that was the third key task in General Dickinson's strategic vision. I mentioned earlier, we have allied presence in a lot of organizations already. I think that will only grow over time. It's something that the United States does well. And it's something that we've always relied on when it comes to national security and international security efforts. So thanks, Kevin. Good to see you again.
So, well, we just got actually one more question. Tim McMillan. Tim, if you want to go ahead and ask that. So Tim, we can't hear you. Oh, I'll go ahead and ask the question myself. So the question is this: there's been considerable press coverage regarding the Senate Intelligence Committee requesting in the fiscal year 2021 Intel Act that the Director of National Intelligence provide a report on what they're calling the unidentified aerial phenomena. Considering these could be adversarial technology, or simply put, any unknowns could represent a potential threat, as Joint Forces Command has SpaceCom been involved in this effort or coordinated with other components to address the stated concern?
Yeah, so Tim, I'm not sure I'm completely following your question. Here's what I will say is we have a very important and growing partnership with the intelligence community writ large. It's necessary, again, to understand what's happening in the space domain, to go after, again, General Dickinson's first key task, which is to understand our competition. We have great partnerships with across the intelligence community, the organizations that comprise the intelligence community. Probably the tip of that spear is at the National Space Defense Center, where we have representatives from the key intelligence community organizations there assisting us day in and day out. And so again, it's an important important partnership for U.S. Space Command moving forward.
Okay. A question from Stephen Harris. Stephen? All right, I'll go ahead and ask this question as well. So what are your thoughts now that Space Force has joined the intelligence community and their primary mission is to monitor space? Is there any duplication of efforts between the two agencies?
So, hey, I say no. So all the other services are part of the intelligence community. So I think this was probably inevitable that Space Force would join. It was just a matter of kind of understanding what that relationship would be and what Space Force would bring to that table. The Space Force will have the job of developing expertise with regard to space intelligence. You know, I think if we look to intelligence experts understanding threats in the maritime domain, the United States Navy, right? They're the ones that produce intelligence expertise for that warfighting domain. And the same for the Air Force in the air domain and the Army for the land domain. It's natural that the Space Force now will be the organization to develop space intelligence professionals, and that core cadre of expertise will be added to the overall national intelligence set of expertise, particularly for the space domain. I think only natural that Space Force would be part of that. And of course, U.S. Space Command is going to be the beneficiary of that expertise as it grows, as well as all of the other capabilities that the intelligence community as a whole will bring to bear.
Thank you. The next question is from Doug Liger. Doug, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Thanks, General. Really appreciate this discussion. It's very, very illuminating. I'm just curious how Space Command is approaching the threat posed by space debris, given the number of launches that is going to continue to increase from spacefaring nations, and the fact debris is now self-generating and is really a threat to our assets. And up to that, can debris mitigation be done without international cooperation, given that, you know, the potential cascade event if satellites collide and put more debris into the US?
Yeah. Hey, Doug. Thanks for focusing in on that. You know, I've talked about space debris a little bit today already, but you're absolutely right. It is a challenge for us, and it's continuing. It continues to grow. By the way, it doesn't grow steadily at a steady pace, right? We have certain events, such as the Chinese ASAT test, that add a discontinuous jump to the amount of debris that we have to track. Right now, we're able to keep up with it. You know, we're improving our ability to track space debris and active space objects, which are increasing also almost at an exponential rate now in the space domain. We're able to keep up with it. But I worry, as much as many of you, I'm sure, that are on this call here today, that the problem will grow to a point where it really becomes hard to manage. And so I really, this is a call to action really to many of you. How do we fix it? You know, what we've been doing to date, I think, is helping a little bit. We are trying to make when we purposely put satellites into orbit, to minimize the debris associated with deploying satellites. You know, in the 1960s and 70s, we were littering, literally, in many ways, with the pieces that would come off of a third stage or deployment vehicle when putting a satellite. We're mitigating those, and that's responsible, and that's great. Engineering our satellites so that we can put them into proper disposal orbits or re-enter them if they're in low Earth orbit to get them out of the way is another responsible mechanism. How do we go after the debris that's actually there, or if it starts to grow, or if we had, as you alluded to, a Kessler syndrome situation where we have a chain reaction? I think we need to look at possible solutions, and maybe industry can come up with some disruptive kinds of solutions to this that I think we'd be interested in partnering with or understanding better. As far as, I think you asked, does it need to be multinational and such? Well, that sure wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt to have more partners on this moving forward. So thanks for highlighting that particular issue. It is a challenge for us. We're keeping up with it right now, but we're keeping an eye on it.
Thank you for that answer. We, in the insurance industry, we're dealing with debris questions all the time. So I can tell you it's hot on a lot of people's minds. I wanted to go and ask a question myself, if that was okay. And that's about the recently proposed relocation of the Space Command to Huntsville. I don't want to make this a political conversation, of course, and take that to the side, but I was wondering if you could provide some thoughts regarding what logistical challenges that might entail, and if these would involve into any disruption of the mission or anything else like that. If you could provide your comments on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll keep that pretty short. I think we'll see where this decision goes from our national leadership, and we will maintain focus on doing the mission the best way we possibly can, no matter where we are. Over.
Okay, thank you. So I think we are closing out on the amount of time that we have here today. And actually, we've been able to answer everyone's question, which I think is a great thing. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and you in particular, Lieutenant General Shaw, for your thoughtful remarks, and for Robert Kerbeam for his introduction to you. And of course, everyone who submitted questions today for what was quite an interesting conversation. And again, I'd like to thank Maxar, who's the sponsor of today's event, allowing it to be free for the virtual events to be free at WSBR today. Our next event